Meet the world champion that barely calculated. We are talking about Tigran Petrosian, the ninth world champion from the Soviet Union. He loved Nimzowitsch, he loved his book My System, and this game was played in 1960 in Copenhagen in Nimzowitsch Memorial Tournament. So he was paying tribute to his hero who lived in Copenhagen also for many, many years. All right. Who is Petrosian, the ninth world champion? This game was played 3 years before he became the world champion. In this instructive classic series, we are looking at those strong players games against slightly lower rated opponents because those games show us clean concepts. We are focusing on a very instructive idea that a master is demonstrating as cleanly as possible. Okay, folks, please check the entire playlist if you haven't done it yet. Now, many of you have asked me to also analyze the game of Petrosian. This game shows his style very nicely. He loved the knights as well because he was such a great positional player. He knew exactly where to place those knights, creating good squares for them and dominating the bishops, right? Nimzowicz's teachings, blockade and then destroy. He was really loving that book. Petrosian says his bedside book was Nimzowicz's My System. He was reading it daily basis basically. So we'll see how Nimzowicz's ideas of blockade, gaining strong squares and so on, pawn play, will be reflected in this game. Let's begin then, folks. He starts with d4 as he usually does, Tigran Petrosian, and we are reaching an interesting structure in the Dutch defense. Black chooses the Leningrad Dutch with this fianchetto bishop, right? Fianchetto and then d6 and so on. That's a very fighting system actually. And look how Petrosian is playing. He's choosing a very, very simple and solid setup to blunt the bishop. He's getting this pawn chain and he already gets the bishop outside of the pawn chain. He will later form this pawn triangle. So his bishop will not be crying on c1. Yeah, so that's a very nice idea for white, just to solve the bishop problem and get a very solid position. And here we are seeing already a very interesting moment, folks. After the knight c6, he goes, you tell me, maybe you can start the video already here, by the way. White to play, folks. Black, of course, wants to castle short, then play e5 to get the beautiful pawn center, maybe then play the move e4 or f4 to gain the initiative also on the king side and also in the center. So, how do you fight against the opponent's ideas in chess? Here, Petrosian finds a beautiful move, queen b3. He claims, I'm stopping you from castling short in this position, and this queen is annoyingly active on b3, cannot be easily chased away either. If you ever play the move d5 to blunt the queen, then you're giving me this beautiful juicy e5 outpost, correct? So everything is give and take in chess. d5 would also kill the bishop over here, so that's not the move that they want to play. By playing d6, they really want to play the move e5 later on. So queen b3 already puts a question mark to black. Okay, where is your king going in this position? All right, interesting. You see how he's not blindly making normal moves, but fights against the opponent's idea. He goes h6, folks. He goes h6. Petrosian doesn't mind giving the bishop for the knight. That's also what signifies his style. He's trusting his ability of using the knights nicely, as demonstrated in this game. That knight disappears. His claim is very simple. He gave up his bad bishop, right? Because you can claim this bishop is a bad bishop for white in this pawn structure. So he doesn't mind giving the bad bishop for the knight who was actually fighting for those light squares, right? Those key light squares was controlled by the knight. Now the knight is gone, which means white actually intensified control of those light squares. And the final claim is this: in this beautiful triangular pawn formation, this bishop is sort of useless. Yes, black has the extra dark square bishop, but that's a blunted bishop in this structure. And you still cannot castle. He also doesn't waste any more time in the opening. So that justifies this trade on f6. Okay, folks? Because exchanges are very committal. I try to explain everything to you, right? So, again, Petrosian here doesn't make an automatic move. He makes a very purposeful move, very committal move actually. So I want you to stop the video right now, folks. Please, how would you play this position with white? Petrosian's claim is very simple, folks. Black wasted time in the opening with those moves, and the king is in the center. So when you have a time advantage, plus when the opponent king is in the center of the board, you generally want to open up the game, right? That's exactly what Petrosian does. He goes e4. It's an attempt to open up the center of the board. Also to activate the knight. If black takes, my knight will get to this beautiful central square on e4. Okay? That justifies this move. By playing e4, folks, he still keeps the bishop blunted. Just notice how the pawn chain is blunting the knight as well as the bishop on f6. So that doesn't activate any of the black pieces, but white wants to activate his pieces. So, in this position, black player went e5, folks. Another very committal central pawn break. If he takes on e4, as I mentioned, knight takes e4, black still cannot castle. If you attack my knight, then I can take that bishop, because now if you look at the structure, folks, it's again a symmetrical pawn formation, but black has so many weaknesses on the king side, plus the king is still stuck in the center. White can castle long and already play the move rook e1, and this king cannot castle in this position. It won't be easy at all for black. Plus there's pressure on b7. White can always take on b7 later. You see, white is ahead of time in this position, and that's been shown in this variation basically. So that's exactly why black doesn't play this way. If he does go e6, maybe that's the best move actually in this position, to keep it closed for the moment for the bishops. Because think about that, black needs time to consolidate their position. Black has the bishop pair, maybe some long-term prospects. So e6 is sort of logical for black, right? Also sort of preparing to castle short in this position. I think Petrosian's idea was bishop d3 in this position, folks. And he's a very prophylactic player. His claim is that now if you castle short, then I will take, this pawn is pinned, thus I can take on f5 with my bishop, right? So I think that was one of his ideas behind the move e4, to quickly play bishop b3 here. But black doesn't go e6, he does go e5. It's a committal move, right? His king is sort of stuck in the center. He can no longer play the move e6 either. But that's why the video is in the instructive classics series. Why? Because we need some subtle mistakes from the opponent's side for the master to show their defect. Here, Petrosian chooses a very, very typical vintage Petrosian move, folks. He plays the move, bam, bishop b5. What could be the reason behind the move, folks? Can you please explain to me? Obviously, he's getting ready for castling short. Maybe he will castle short as well. He's keeping it very flexible with his king. His king is very safe in the center. It's a flexible move. Plus, by basically attacking the knight on c6, he's also intensifying his central advantage. And maybe he will take that knight on c6 and damage black's queen side. Remember, he doesn't mind giving up his bishops for the knights, Petrosian. Alright, so black player plays the move king f8, folks. He just wants to unpin himself, and maybe the king actually wants to go to g7, right? That's a logical move actually. He wants to artificially castle in this position. Now, bishop d7 might be answered by castle short. If black repeats what they want, maybe white could play like this and still claim that he's the first one to occupy the d-file, his rook is well placed, and this bishop on f6 is a bad piece. Just focus on the bishop on f6, guys. That's a very, very bad piece. Black's dark square bishop doesn't have any effect in this game. Alright, and if black took on d4 here, white can capture both ways. Both options are quite nice. Even knight takes d4 puts pressure on those pieces. If you take my knight on d4, then that's actually a very, very good thing for white. Your king still cannot castle. You see, black is facing problems even in this variation. That's exactly why king f8 was chosen, folks. But here, Petrosian makes a vintage Petrosian move again. He takes that knight because now that knight was no longer pinned. It was putting pressure. That knight is gone. Look at the structure, folks. Look at the structure. The first weaknesses has been created on the queen side. a7 pawn has become weak. c7 has become a target. And even c6 has become a target. But the next one is also very important. He also takes on e5. He's clarifying the structure, folks. He's clarifying the structure. He's also opening up the d-file. And now you see it, right? They become clear weaknesses, those 3 pawns. Just focus on the queen side pawn structure. This is why he took that knight. Just going back to this position, folks, right? Master already sees favorable transformations of the pawn structure. So that's actually a very, very nice plan for white. His claim is very simple. I have the knight pair, You have the bishop pair. He's trusting on the ability of those knights to outplay the bishops in his position. Incredibly interesting imbalance has been created. Nimzowitsch also preached those positions that favored knights. So now we will see. First of all, let's observe the situation, right? Let's observe the situation. What is going on here? What is going on and how should white play in this position, folks? My first observation is this. Well, the bishop sucks. So this bishop is totally harmless. You'll play king g7 probably to safeguard your king. My king can go either to king side or queen side. But when I want to put pressure on those targets, I somehow want to find a square for my knight. Tell me about the outpost squares, folks. Which square has become an outpost for white here? Look at the c5 square. This pawn transformation made the c5 square an outpost for white, correct? So our game plan should be at some point to get a knight on c5 because knights love stable outpost squares like this. No black pawn can chase that knight away. So that's a dream square for the knight. The problem is, how is that knight going to c5? Right? That's my question to you. So please formulate a plan right now for white that will teleport your knight to c5. Let's say in 3 moves, okay? Where would you then place one of your other pieces, so to speak, yeah? That's my final prompt to you. We got a great player, folks, if you found Petrosian's move queen a4. Such a multi-purpose move. Look at the effect of it. First of all, it creates my plan as I just described to you. Now knight b3 is vacated, plus knight c5 is coming. What else? The queen is still supporting the pawn on e4. Thus, knight b3 won't hang a pawn. You see, safety first. He's already preparing knight b3 and he's already defending his e4 pawn accordingly. What else? This queen is putting pressure in the freshly created weakness on a7 plus freshly created weakness on c6. Look how master is playing in this position. He's orienting his pieces towards targets while keeping everything safe, while looking at all of his pieces, creating a plan, middle game plan. Again, around weaknesses in the position. That's a beautiful moment to understand, folks, right? Weakness number 1, weakness number 2, weakness number 3. He sees it instantly and he formulates a plan accordingly. This shapes the move queen a4. It's totally reverse engineering. He first starts from those weaknesses, he creates a plan around those weaknesses, and he's improving step by step. Beautiful, beautiful, right? Queen d6 was chosen. Black wants to defend those weaknesses somehow, but this queen will be harassed later on. It's not easy to even suggest a plan for black, folks. And of course, Petrosian plays a consistent move. If you say A, you say B. That was the point of queen a4, folks. Okay? Blockading square on c5. Bishop d7. Well, he wants to maybe defend c6, maybe at some point play c5. But again, look at those bishops. Please compare the black bishops with the white knights. White knights has much more potential in this position than the black bishops. Nimzowitsch will be proud, folks. If they play the move queen d3, probably that was a better move, by the way, folks. This queen d3. Petrosian could defend e4 with this move. Queen b5 is a very good move for black. This way, he's stopping white's plan. Look at this. This was maybe the only way for black to fight, actually. Difficult resource to find, but after queen b5, he will be messing up with white's intentions on the queen side. If you ever trade the queens this way, it only helps the black pawn structure, of course, folks, right? Look at this. But black misses this chance, and he plays bishop d7 here. And here comes Petrosian's very logical move, rook d1, chasing the queen away, also targeting that bishop. After queen e7, Petrosian makes one more interesting move, folks. How would you treat this position? Please take a moment here. Can you guess Petrosian's very interesting strategic move in this position? Folks, transformation of advantages. He plays the move knight c5. This looks insane at first sight, right? Why are you giving away your beautiful knight for that bad bishop? And this is why chess is a beautiful and resourceful game, because his claim is very simple. By trading those pieces, I'm creating a monstrous rook on d7, and this rook is putting pressure on that pawn on c7 too. Your king is still on f8. My king is much safer after I will castle short very, very soon, and I will dominate this position with my heavy pieces. This bishop still sucks, so I left you with a terrible bishop on the board. My knight can improve it's a very good position. Also, this queen is tied down on c6. Please evaluate this position, folks. His king is very safe, but this king won't be as safe. There's already pressure here. If you play rook c8, then everything is getting paralyzed and tied down. I can castle short, followed by rook d1. Beautiful position for white, folks. Just observe the situation, please. Okay, so you see how flexible a master is thinking. Just because he wants to get the knight to c5, he doesn't shy away from trading the knight for the bishop at the right circumstances. That's why this game is beautiful. The art of exchanging pieces. Black cannot take the knight. That's why he went bishop e8. But this bishop is terrible. Still tied down on that pawn on c6. And now white has created a beautiful blockading knight on c5. And how do we cement that knight? You tell me the move. Of course, he goes b4. And now we are seeing this beautiful juicy knight on c5 shining happily. You see how he formed a plan and how we execute that plan until this moment? It's like a strategic mini operation. Now the first operation is complete. You got yourself a beautiful knight. The second stage begins. He castles his king, of course. He connects his rooks, folks. See how e4 is still totally controlled by the white pieces. If you ever take on e4, I can simply take back with the knight, or I can even do this and take on e4 with my other knight and have two dominating knights on the board, folks. That's actually a very difficult position to play for black. He goes rook f8. He somehow wants to get something from the rook, but please observe the misery in black's position. This rook is paralyzed in guarding the weak pawn on a7. This bishop is paralyzed in guarding the weak pawn on c6. This bishop has zero activity because of the pawn on e5. And what is going on in the black's army? There is no plan and no coordination whatsoever. And here Petrosian looks at his queen. Let's say that's a worst place piece. The queen can improve further in this position. How does the queen improve? Tell me one square that has more prospects in this position, folks, with the queen. He goes queen a6. That's an incredibly beautiful move as well. Again eyeing c6, again eyeing a7, stopping rook c8, introducing queen b7 ideas, but at some point he can also move the queen to c4 and switch to this diagonal if necessary. The queen can even go back to e2 and rejoin the game from that spot. The queen definitely has more scope on a6 than on a4. Look at this small improvement to that piece. Since black has zero threats, white was not facing any threats, he's making a small improvement. This way, I forgot to mention, he's also stopping the move a5. Of course, because the only way for black to chase, to sort of disturb white's queenside grip is to play the move a5, right? Because a5 would also get rid of the weakness on a7. Prophylaxis genius Petrosian plays a multi-purpose move queen a6 that stops a7, a5 too. Bind is intensifying. Look at the suffering in black's position. He takes on e4 because it's very difficult to say anything to black. How should black play in this position? I don't see a natural plan for black. Okay, just very difficult. He goes f takes e4, and again Petrosian doesn't want to move the beautiful knight on c5, so he does go bam, knight d2, folks. This knight on f3 was not doing anything, and now his vision is to get this knight to this beautiful e4 outpost. He wants to have two dominating knights in his position. Positional play in its purest form, folks. If he took on e4, well, if you take on e4 with the knight, he would allow the move bishop d7, right? Because that knight was eyeing the d7 square. If you move the knight from c5, then you allow bishop d7, and that bishop might become an active piece, either of these squares. So prophylaxis genius Petrosian doesn't give any counterplay to black. Black is facing enormous threats like this, so he does go e3 just to be able to create a weakness, maybe to play bishop g5 to attack that pawn, but Petrosian doesn't even take that pawn. He goes, well, blunder check please, folks. Can he go knight e4 in this position? Is it a safe move or a blunder? You're a great player if you say it's a safe move because your queen is stopping the move e2, right? It looks like I'm allowing a pawn fork. Hey, my rooks are forked. And now we see another point of the move queen a6. This queen is eyeing the square. Look at those knights, folks. Please stop the video. Look at the bind that is faced by black. Cannot move a single piece in this position. Amazingly beautiful blockading knights on outpost squares. So after knight e4, he takes on f2, but that's also terrible because this rook is now becoming a very active piece, and white also has ideas like this on the f file. Just observe the bind. Black has an extra pawn, by the way, but that is completely meaningless in this position, right? Black has an extra pawn, it's completely not felt. Please observe the white pieces, white's piece activity, and compare them with black's pieces, folks. Zero coordination, disconnected rooks, pieces paralyzed in defending weaknesses, and he's paying for that. White already has a winning advantage. If you ask Stockfish, Stockfish is giving a winning advantage for white, despite being a pawn down. And I want you to observe right now. That's a great evaluation training. Why do you think white is winning in this position? Great exercise. Bishop g5, and maybe only now calculation is becoming important. So far, he only improved his pieces step by step using chess principles. Very minimal calculation was required, right? Small mini plan, mini operations. Here, since white has dominating pieces, he thinks maybe I have a decisive blow. Maybe there's a small tactical operation that can win me this game. And now you will stop the video and maybe you will see how white can play in this position. Are you seeing a resourceful line for white? Because there's actually a forced win from this position. I want you to go a little bit deeper here. Look at your forcing moves, please, okay? Make use of your good pieces. Look at this knight, for example. This knight is a monstrous piece. In all these ensuing tactical operations, this knight's ability to give a fork will be so relevant. Folks, Petrosian, since he's facing this threat, he first starts with the move rook takes f8, of course. My question is this: should black take this way or this way? Can they take with the queen? No, because if they take with the queen, you see this knight on c5. You see those black pieces are on the same color as this knight. And when that's the case, knight forks are imminent, right? Knight forks become imminent when the opponent's good pieces are on the same color as your knight. Thus, knight e6 wins the game. So, king f8 is forced. F8 is forced. Now, again, Petrosian, he looks at his position. He's trying to find a forcing solution. And he does find the move, knight takes g5. Can they take back with the queen, folks? You tell me. Is it possible? No. Again, we see this monstrous knight's ability to give a fork and end the game. Look at this. Un petit combinaison, little combinations. Thus, this knight has to be captured back with the pawn. Everything was forced until here. We are left with beautiful pieces for white versus terrible pieces for black. Now, I want you to find the next move by Petrosian that forced a resignation. White to play and win, folks, in this position. Beautiful. It's again all about black's problem pieces, namely the rook on a8, which is loose on that square. Loose pieces are always relevant. Can you combine the loose rook on a8 with the knight's ability to give a fork? This square is loose, only guarded by the queen, and maybe you can come up with a nice tactical idea for white in this position that wins the game. You're a great player, folks, if you saw the move queen b7. Please visualize the move queen b7. You're attacking the rook on a8. What can they play? Their options are very, very limited. The rook cannot go to this, cannot go here, so there's only a single square for the rook, right? But when they play rook d8, can you see a good resource for white, folks? Un petit combinaison, please. You see, the queen was overworked on the square on e6. And you see the knight's ability to give a fork like that? That's exactly why queen b7 is winning the game, folks. Black rook is trapped, has no squares, cannot be defended. And if he does go to d8, you tell me the finishing blow. Of course, very simple. Forcing finish. Boom, knight e6. Another knight fork is visible. And white is winning this game. Isn't it incredible? That amazing knight on c5 was the hero in all these finishing blow combinations. That's why we say tactics flow from good positions. White had an amazing position in this case, right? White had an amazing positional advantage. And at some point, those positional advantages will favor tactically. They will work in your favor, just like in this case, right? So seeing such games are also very important to trust our skills of building up a good position, but also looking at those forcing solutions once we have an amazing domination like this. Usually, tactics start working in your favor when you have beautiful pieces, beautiful and active pieces like that. Just like here, right? It was only in this position that white did some calculation, but the calculation was not like something crazy, deep or difficult. He only looked at his most forcing moves, folks. It's actually a very simple calculation because he's only finishing the game by a series of forcing moves. Black has no choices along the way, right? If you think about that, that's actually the simplest possible calculation in chess. Just observing our most forcing moves, using some basic tactical recognition, right? Some basic knight forks, of course, are also important here. As long as your basic tactical skills are there for white, it's actually an easy combination, easy calculation for white, don't you think? Even here, I'm looking at this loose rook on a8. I'm discovering my forcing moves. I'm seeing black is facing difficulties. This rook is almost trapped. So I'm forcing this move after queen b7. And I'm seeing this beautiful follow-up to it. Three-ply calculation, short calculation, right? Nothing difficult about this. And it's about building up an amazing position that is later delivered by a concrete calculation. And now we also see the final point of the move queen a6, right? As I mentioned, among everything else he was doing, he was also hinting at this idea of queen b7, right? This positional genius almost felt like he calculated everything. No, he didn't see everything from afar, but he was trusting to build his amazing pieces to great squares. And once they're in great squares like this, then tactics start working for you. It's a beautiful game, folks. I hope you liked this video, folks. I hope this was a good introduction to Petrosian for you. I can show you more of his examples. I very much like his style. Nimzowitsch, again, influences by Nimzowicz's book, Ideas of Blockade, Strong Squares, Weakness Awareness, Prophylaxis, of course, right? I can show you some of his amazingly beautiful defensive prophylaxis games, for example. This example shows us, first of all, that bishop pair is not always better than the knight pair. Knights love those static weaknesses, just like here, right? Statically weakened squares. They like stable spots in the center of the board, ideally, right? And how flexibility is everything in chess. At the right time, we can exchange our good knight for the bad bishop, just like here, right? If black did so, to gain other advantages, transformation of advantages, right? But once we build up a position like this, then step by step, we improve because we're not facing any threats. We are very safe, but small improvements become important, right? While keeping a grip in the position becomes important. And I will leave you guys again with this beautiful position that shows his style. Thank you so much for today. Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this video, and I will catch you again on the next episode on Instructive Chess Classics. Bye bye.